So the next one we're going to talk about is post-colonialism. And when we think about colonization, that is the exploitation of one national or ethnic group by another. And this is a powerful destructive force that disrupts the identities of both groups, actually. So we see this in people from the Western world colonizing the United States and exploiting the resources of the North America and also oppressing indigenous people like Native Americans. We have to think about how colonized societies are forced to the margins by their colonizers in a process called othering. So we think about how Native Americans in the United States have been pushed to the margins to reservations where their way of life is now viewed as other, different, and wrong. And we see this historically with the Native American schools, which were made to indoctrinate Native American students into becoming white Christian people. And we think about how literature written by colonizers often distorts the experiences and realities of the colonized. So we have to think about how literature written by the dominant class represents the people who are now other. Now, on the other hand, literature written by the colonized often attempts to redefine or reclaim a sense of culture identity. We think about this in many of our magical realism texts, how a lot of those characters and authors are of marginalized, colonized people, and they're using magical realism to reclaim their space. And we think about how the legacy of the colonizers on the colonized involves a lot of economic, political, and cultural disenfranchisement, and often continues to affect the colonized country long after the colonizers leave. We see this even in the movie Black Panther with Wakanda, and we see this in reality about how many African countries still are in disarray, even though the colonizers have been gone for 50, 100, 200 years. Questions we want to consider when we look at a piece of literature, either whether it's written by the colonizer, so maybe white people, or if it's written by the colonized. So, for example, like Ana Castillo's So Far from God. So we want to think about how does this literary text explicitly or allegorically or representatively represent various aspects of colonial oppression? So do we have one group overtaking another? Do we have another group rising up? What does the text reveal about the problematics of post colonial identity? So, for example, we think about how do characters grapple with the fact that they're trying to reclaim an identity that has been stolen from them within a culture that is not theirs? What persons or groups does the work identify as other or strange? So, when we look at some of the books we're going to read, we think about who is other and how are they been pushed to the margins and for what reason. We want to think about the cultural differences that shape our perceptions of ourselves, others, and the world that we're living in. Essentially, how do we perceive anything as normal? When we think something is weird or wrong, why is that and what values does that represent? How does the work consider traditionally marginalized populations? Does it treat them with respect? Does it treat them as an oddity? What are we thinking here? In what ways does the piece of literature affirm Western whiteness as superior or right? And where do we see evidence of what's called the white man's burden? So, the white man's burden is the concept that it is the white people's responsibility to take care of people of color or people from other countries and make sure that they're taken care of because we know right and we are the good people on this earth and we can save everyone. So the picture I have here is from Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, where they are in a palace in India and they're sitting down for dinner. And the young woman in the picture is very excited. She is so hungry. And every course that she is served is like a monkey's brain or eyeball stew. And she's about to throw up. She makes a big deal about how ugly and gross and icky it is. And so this would be an example of seeing another culture or the colonized group as food as wrong, icky, or distasteful, because of course they are all white, British, and American people in the colonized country of India, which at the time that the movie takes place in, India was under the control of England, right? And so in this situation, when the characters act overtly disgusted by the food presented, it presents the indigenous people, the Indians, as wrong, gross, distasteful, whereas the palates of the white people are more refined and are far above how disgusting this food is that all the brown people are enjoying. So that would be affirming whiteness and Western as superior. So that would be an example of looking at a text through that post colonial lens.